Welcome! This video contains an introduction, an interview so you can gain deeper understanding of the subject from spirit level, and a group frequency calibration so you can start to clear the frequency distortion patterns around this topic. Enjoy!
Hi everyone, this is Cheong. In this episode, we're shaking it up and providing a different perspective on frequency work and awakening, because that can often help you get better context for your own journey. Today, I'm interviewing Chris Sprague, who is my husband and business partner, because he's of a very high resonance, but perceives and has had a very different experience in his path to awakening from me. He doesn't have the same abilities that I do, and he often doesn't, quote unquote, see things. Many of you have had similar experiences and wanted to find out more about his. After the discussion, we're going to wrap it up with a group frequency calibration to begin to help you clear the distortion patterns around this topic. So let's get going. So Chris, we've had some really good questions come in because we've asked our community what they would like to ask you, because you have a really different perspective on awakening than I do. My journey has been really different from yours.
Right.
And what we perceive is really different. So a lot of people wanted to find out what your perspective was, and you're also a dude. So I think that also makes it a very different perspective than what I have.
Right.
So what I'm going to do today is just run through some of these questions. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Okay, cool. Okay. First question. I too don't really see, sense, or feel things. I was actually shocked to hear Chris didn't either. If I could ask him a question, it would probably be along the lines of, how does he gauge his spiritual ascension when he doesn't see things? There's all this talk of it being an experiential experience, but I'm not feeling it or seeing it. Is he? And what does it feel like for him? If he didn't have Karen there who can see his frequency or ascension level, how would he know?
Right. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff bundled in that one
Tons
question,
of stuff.
right? So it's true that obviously you feel and sense a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't feel or sense things in the same way at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I first started, just in the journey of exploring spirit stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I would, we were together at the time, so, but,
we were.
We'd go to these different seminars or like shaman workshops or various things, and all these people would be having these experiences, and they like, I'm saying the shaman one, I remember specifically we went to this one like 20 years ago or something in San Francisco, and people were saying, I went in like in deep, and I saw all these dolphins, and I'm like, I saw the inside of my eyelids, what the hell's wrong with me? And it just really felt like I was judging myself because all these people were having these wild experiences, and I was literally having no experience other than the experience of sitting there feeling like I was failing at something.
Right.
And it was really frustrating.
Yeah.
So that's been like a sort of a backdrop soundtrack almost, is my own self-talk about that for a long time. And what I've realized eventually, though, is that everyone's journey is going to look totally different. And we all have our own sort of unique flavor or unique approach to, or an experience of this awakening process. And like, I want to make it clear to everyone that this is an ongoing thing. It's like, whoever you look to and whoever you talk to, they all have plenty to go. I mean, that's just,
it's infinite. Really.
It's infinite, right? So I mean, it's never done. But what I've sort of learned to do for myself is actually worry less about like what level am I at, or am I making progress or not. I think if I had to come up with a way to gauge that for myself, yes, in part, it's like someone like you or someone else with special abilities telling me, but that's not really, it's better to be, if possible, a little bit more independent of that. What I've learned to do now is just simply use the way I feel about my own, like, about living my life, like, the way my life feels to me at any given time. And so the awakening process is one of raising your resonance, your frequency resonance. Yeah. And so the way I see it, at least, is the higher your resonance goes, the more awake you are. So we all occupy, like I'm sure people have heard you mention before, we occupy a bandwidth. And the question is just, where's your overall like your overall segment of the bandwidth, and how high are you within that? So I'm using, the gauge I would use is just, how do I feel most of the time? So where's my general set point within the bandwidth of what it is to be human? And so if I'm really feeling crummy a lot of the time, that means that, there's something really crunchy going on, or more likely I have a lot of work still to do. If my overall experience is one of awkwardness and uncomfortableness and dissatisfaction and things like that. Whereas if I feel better most of the time, then I'm probably making good progress.
Yeah. I would also say, just as somebody who's lived with you for quite a while now, is that from what I've noticed, and you touched on this a little bit before, but you just care a lot less. So before, I would say that my experience of you was that you were very, very mentally focused. So you're a very smart guy, and you tried to figure everything out with your mind. And so you were always trying to like pin everything sort of down to make you feel sort of safe or certain or like know where you were.
Sure.
But what I've noticed in you as your journey has continued is you've just dropped that. That sense of needing to know from a mental perspective has dropped away. And I think you even remember, I remember right around the time when you said, thinking doesn't exactly serve me that much because a lot of the things that I'm telling myself aren't really that helpful. Yeah. And I actually receive things like knowingness without thinking faster. And for just people who are watching this, Chris receives very fast. He just can't distinguish if it's actually a thought or knowingness. But it's so, and this happens for a number of people, where it's like I don't know what the sense is, but it's like the knowingness is so clear. And Chris is really about the physical experience. So it's like in that moment, you're so sure because it's so strong and you're so sure. And as you move away from that particular moment in time, you become less sure and your mind used to kick in a lot more about, did that actually happen? Was that a true thing or was that just a thought, et cetera? Yeah. So you've just dropped a lot of that from what I've noticed in terms of...
I mean, I've basically given myself permission to think less. I know it sounds crazy to just like not think, but a lot of people are like, of course you got to think. But I've realized that for me personally, I'm trying to use my mind as a tool when it's called for, but not let it just constantly run the show. Because it will if it wants to do that. It wants to always be on top and be like, yeah, I'm running things here. But it's really not, and it's not us. And the longer the more we recognize that we are not our thoughts, the more distance we can have, and the more we can basically say to the mind, like, just stop it now, you know. Yeah. And it may or may not stop, but even knowing that it's not you gives me distance from it, so that I can, if it's going on about something, I go, oh yeah, that's just nonsense that my mind is doing.
Yeah. Exactly. I feel like that's giving you a lot of freedom.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so the next question is kind of similar. How do you perceive notice that your resonance has risen? Do you get upgraded as well, and what does that look like?
So, as far as, upgrades, like, so I feel like perhaps with you, it's a little bit different. Like you have certain abilities, and then when you're doing a session with someone or something like that, you realize, oh, I can do more quickly or something like that. So you're like, okay, that was just an upgrade that I experienced. I don't know that I have the exact same experience of that where I will say, oh yes, I just had an upgrade. I mean, I'll go through periods where, especially because we do things together, it's like sometimes we go through these things simultaneously, right?
Yeah.
So I can use that as a gauge. Obviously, not everyone can do that because they don't have you as their spouse. So, well, actually, as far as I know, I'm the only one who has that.
I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure about that too.
You would know too. So I mean, again, it would just come back to how I feel. Yeah. That's really the gauge. Like, how much of my time do I spend feeling like this is awesome, this human experience is awesome, my life is awesome, even if there's all kinds of weird, crunchy stuff going on in our worlds, that doesn't mean we have to have the experience of, oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you can have stuff going on like around you that isn't, like, if you just think about it, you realize, okay, that's really not very awesome. But my experience of it isn't that it has to be painful or that I have to engage with it in that way.
Yeah.
So the more I can, in spite of what goes on around me, feel really comfortable and okay, the more I realize, okay, like this whole thing is working.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, actually, you know, I told some people this before, but I used to be so vulnerable to yucky stuff around me that I didn't want to know about the news for about 10 years. I specifically decided I'm not going to read news, watch news, or anything for like 10 years. And then I don't know how many years ago, 2 years ago or something like that, I was like, oh, no, I feel internally strong enough. Now I'm going to specifically watch the news, or I read it online, you know. I'm going to read the newspaper and really know what's going on everywhere. And then how stable can I feel in the midst of knowing all the horrible crap that's going on? I mean, I'm reading about genocide and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Can I stay stable and still feel really positive about myself, my world, our world, and humanity as a whole, in spite of all the yucky stuff that happens? And so I know that's like lifting weights to me now, is like, you know, reading the news. And the more I can I'm not saying everyone should do this. I mean, you'll know whether this is something that's right for you or not. But the more I'm able to be present with all this information that's really heavy and really unpleasant, and the more I'm able to stay really stable inside and feel really still positive, the more I know that I'm doing really well. So I use that as an external gauge.
Yeah, and I would also say that, and something you haven't noted, is that you notice what triggers you, that used to trigger you that doesn't now.
That doesn't now.
Right? So there are a lot of things, like Chris used to have a real challenge with like, not road rage, but he would get really irate with people in traffic, for example.
Sure.
And that doesn't really...
Oh, if someone cut me off.
Cut you
driving,
off,
whatever,
like you would really
take
that
really
personally and get really upset.
Yeah.
But now you don't actually anymore, and that's a gauge of your neutrality. Yeah. Or even with people, like Chris is very sensitive to other people's frequency resonance and energetic, and so it's
although I don't perceive it that way.
He doesn't perceive it that way, but he feels it. He knows it. And it's sort of like you can sense when you don't like someone very strongly, like immediately.
Right, or I don't trust them.
And you don't trust them or whatever.
Yeah.
But you're not impacted by that. You just hold your space. Or, for example, I'll say, oh, did you notice that person? You'll say, yeah, I noticed that I defended against them. I'm like, yeah, because they're possessed or whatever. Right. So you may not know why.
And I wouldn't know they're possessed, but I would know, like, I don't
want to be near them. And also that you did something to hold your space better or whatever, right? So that's part of your gauge is what I would say of where you are in terms of holding your space and how strong you are.
True, yeah.
And I would say also, just in my experience of you, is that you also notice when you have upgrades, it's actually quite physical. So you'll say like, oh, I felt that tingling up through my spine, or I feel the tingling in my head, or I have goosebumps, or that type of thing will happen.
Which I didn't used to experience much, but I think I'm experiencing that a little bit more now.
Yeah.
But I still don't, like necessarily on my own, I wouldn't necessarily read that as an upgrade. You know what I mean? Like, if I felt some tinglies, what did that mean? I don't even know, but I also, like you said before, I don't worry about that meant anymore. I really just don't care. It's just I'm going to just live my life and do the best I can all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say that from my perspective, your perception or feeling of frequencies has gotten more refined. That's my experience. Okay. All right. So the next question is, this is such amazing work, frequency work. And how do we help beings and our family members get on board with us with regards to this work? If we could all figure this out, the world, meaning if more people did this work, the world would be a better place. So how do we do that? And is there a solution you can propose to help us see the perfection of every person and family member so we have a deeper understanding of divine timing and free will for the people we are closest to?
Okay. Good questions.
Yeah, it's a good question.
And I think a lot of people, come up against that too. Because, let's say you're having this amazing experience doing all this frequency work, really feeling your circumstances around you change, you're feeling better about yourself and your life, and everything seems to be going better for you. And you look around your family and think, or your friends or whoever, the people you love around you, you think, oh man, it would be so awesome if they had that experience too, right? You just really want that.
Yeah, because you love them.
Because you love them, yeah. And so I think ultimately the key word in this scenario is neutrality. And then I'm going to switch focus to the word focus also. So neutrality and focus. So first is neutrality, and it's easy to say a word. It's not necessarily as easy to experience that, but the higher your frequency resonance rises, the more likely you're going to have the experience of the second part of the question, which is just realizing that everything is okay as it is. Nothing really needs to change. Judgment and like whether something is good or something is bad, that's a very mental concept. Like if you take the human mind out of the equation, there is literally no such thing as good and bad. There's just things that happen. So it requires the human mind to then assess some facts or some situation and then create a judgment on that. So that's where good and bad comes from, right? And so the more you're mired in your human mind, the less neutral you are. Likely the lower your resonance is in general. So it's harder to be neutral about all the people you care about and the people you love, and whether they are or aren't on board making amazing progress like you feel, like you are. So the key to getting neutral is in just focusing, like I was saying before, focusing on yourself. So instead of thinking about how to correct things for everyone else, is just simply think, okay, I'm going to keep on working on myself as much as I can. I'm going to just work on raising my resonance. And as that happens, I'll be leading by example. That's kind of like transcendent leadership idea that we've talked about before. And so others will look to you, if they're ready for that, and say, dang, what she or he is doing, whatever, that's amazing. I want some of that too. So they'll just come on board naturally. This is part of, wanting to, because you're leading by example. and it comes from you focusing on yourself rather than trying to fix everyone else. It's kind of like the oxygen mask. Put on your oxygen mask first before you put it on everyone else in the plane or whatever.
Yeah.
That same sort of idea.
Yeah.
And as your resonance rises, and because you're focusing on yourself, your level of neutrality can increase. You're more stable yourself. Your feeling of comfort and stability and just general how you feel about your life is less related to what's going on around you and more about how you feel internally. Mm-hmm. And so therefore you're not as concerned about the people around you, which doesn't mean, I don't mean you don't care about them, but I mean you're less concerned about whether they're making the choices that you think are the correct choices.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll sort of extract out of this idea is the idea of love and control, where the people just in general, it's very, very common to feel like, because I love someone, I want to make sure that they're doing what I think is right for them. So that's, again, it's about neutrality and focusing on oneself instead of trying to control what's around you. But just knowing that sometimes love can sort of ooze over into control.
Or control oozes over into love.
Or control oozes over into love, whichever it is, whichever comes first. I don't know if it's a chicken or the egg, I don't know. But knowing that that's a thing, you can be more on the lookout for that thing if it's starting to happen in your life.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is now a relationship question. Okay. So I would love to hear how you evolved together as a couple into new consciousness. How is it different from evolving alone, and what are the particular challenges for a couple?
Wow.
I don't know if we can answer the one, how is it different from evolving alone? Because we've been together, actually.
That's right.
We've been together for a long time, everyone. We've been together since when is it?
Really 94, basically.
94.
Yeah.
So that's a long time.
Yeah.
So our journey has been together the whole time.
Right.
So we can't really answer the alone part.
So what's the rest of the question again?
The question is, I'd love to hear how you evolved together as a couple into new consciousness, and what are the particular challenges for a couple? And so maybe I'll start by answering that. Is that okay? And
sure,
you can tag on. So what started this whole journey really was when I got sick. When I got that, and I went to go see the acupuncturist in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, to help me with my skin stuff. And he was the first person who really understood and saw energy. And then that catalyzed the question for you of what is possible beyond the physical that we're not seeing. You and I had the same question. Really, your question was, how is it that my wife went from totally crazy mess to now totally amazing and vital and awesome
in 5 weeks?
Yeah, exactly.
How could that even? Is that even possible?
Yeah. And so Chris was the one who was reading all these books, because at that time you really wanted to find a teacher. You really thought the teacher was the key, right?
True.
You're like, I really, really want to find a teacher.
Yeah.
And then I followed along. I mean, how we started was I followed along because I had a separate question, which was, how do things really work? That's what I wanted to know. I was like, what is it? How do things really work? And so we had our separate kind of questions.
Or concerns or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is true that in general, especially at the very beginning, this is back in the 90s when we were just first together and stuff, and it's like I would read some book about something, and it'd be some crazy esoteric thing about like Tibetan yoga or something or whatever, and then it'd be like, who can teach us about Tibetan yoga or whatever random, what to me seemed like a super cool wild thing, and it was always really out there, but I just wanted to go find out like what are the perimeters, or what's the outer limit of the human experience, and what is out there that's way beyond the norm, because I know that the norm isn't going to give me that level of satisfaction and stuff about. That stuff isn't as important as the spirit stuff, is really what I always felt. And I still feel that way as well. I mean, so really the way to have the most fulfillment and the way to have just the best, juiciest, awesomest life is to focus on spirit stuff and how that interfaces in your ordinary reality, and then live both, not one or the other. Yeah. You want to say something?
Yeah. So I was going to say, like, Chris was always the one, especially, even now still, where he'd be like, we need to go to Mexico City to Teotihuacan with this person. I'm like, okay. Right. So then off we would go or whatnot. And even so, a lot of these things, a lot of our journey together has been initiated by you.
Right.
I would say I've just followed. So in that way, you were very much leading in your masculine, and I was very much following in the feminine. Not that the feminine has to follow the masculine, but because I was following your full momentum.
Right.
It wasn't like I was holding your coattails or anything like this, but
no,
I followed the impetus.
You followed my excitement there about
exactly.
that. Right.
And so you were usually the one who started that. And I would say that as a couple, how it's evolved for us, it's kind of like we're soul buddies, I think. It's just sort of like really what I would say is that for us, it's like growth has been our number one.
For sure.
For both of us.
Yeah.
For both of us, our biggest driving need is for growth, because we're so curious, even beyond anything else. And so I feel like that has been what has driven us as a couple.
In growth with the understanding that there's always infinite room for growth.
Exactly.
And it's always about self-refinement and just like further tweaking self-mastery. And there's no final actual goal, just that continuous process. Yeah.
And to answer this person's question, what are the particular challenges for a couple? For me, because I had things, more issues around control, was when Chris was detoxing or going through his stuff because he was upgrading or whatever, to not meddle. So meaning to not be like, try to fix it, try to make it better, try to like soften it for you. I was just like, I would just hold the space for you of like, I know you can do this. And I'm not interfering. And man, that is hard when you're living with someone. Because not only is it hard to watch because it's somebody you love, but it's just hard because you're living together. And you're it's kind of this and that.
It's kind of dreadful right now.
It's dreadful right now. You're like, oh my God, please get through this quick. Like this is like really difficult.
It's interesting because that sort of brings in the previous question too about like about love and its overlap with control, right? So it's like, on the one hand, you see someone that you love in a painful situation, and you want to solve that. On the other hand, it's like you can realize, well, maybe going through that painful situation is actually kind of important for that person's development or growth. And so it's like, I think for me, what I've learned to do, or at least I believe this is how I approach it, is like, if you ask for help, I'm going to provide help. But if you're not asking for help, unless it's like something really critical, I mean, it's like, obviously, if you're hanging off a cliff and you're about to plummet into the depths.
And I'm not asking for help.
And you're only screaming, you're not specifically saying, Chris, help me. I'm going to try to pull you up, right? So it's like, I think there's a limit to what I'm saying. But it's like, if you're not asking for help, like not trying to foist that. Or if I really feel like you're not in a position where you can ask for help because you're in such a low state, or it's actually almost more like that happened with me and you, I think, the inverse actually, where I'll just feel so like, ugh, for a minute. I don't even know that I need some help. And so it's like learning how to offer that in a way that isn't trying to make it happen. So things I've learned to say is such as like, sometimes for me, if I'm in an XYZ situation, I would do this.
I'm like, screw you!
That is a possible response that has, in fact, happened in the past.
And vice versa.
Vice versa, no doubt. Yeah, exactly. But it's learning how to offer that in a way that doesn't make it seem like you're trying to control that outcome. So that the person has the choice still to wallow in that yucky stuff, if that's important to them or whatever.
And I would also say that one of the things that's really been different for us is that when we started on this journey, you were much more in your feminine and I was much more in my masculine, in not a good way. And so I think that a lot of our journey has been becoming more of our natural, what do you call this?
I don't know, gender alignment? I don't know.
I don't know. It's like expression of the feminine, right? So we all have a mix of both the feminine and the masculine within us in different ratios. So whichever one is the more dominant or free for you. So for me, my feminine is more dominant, although I do have a very strong masculine side as well. And likewise for you, it's the opposite. And so we have learned, or not just learned, but also been aware of and cultivated.
Almost unlearned also.
Unlearned a bunch of stuff. And the frequency work has been tremendous with that because I've gone into more surrender, more softness, etc. You've become more in your masculine, much like stronger. And also what's really awesome is that if I try to do something and I don't realize that I'm being controlling, you will not tolerate it. You're like, no, like I'm not, no. But it's not like you're angry or, but it's just like you won't have it.
It's just firm.
It's very firm. And it's not that soft. And it's good for me because I'm like, oh, wait, there we go. I just tried to overstep. I tried to control there. That wasn't good. So, and what's wonderful about that is that both of us have enough neutrality that we don't take it personally. So I'm not like,
be a fight.
It's exactly. I'm like, he just told me to back off. Like, screw him. I'm just like, oh, wow, there I was. I overstepped.
When you recognize your own part in whatever is happening.
Exactly. So it's a very fast accountability. And so I would say that's different. And I think in a couple than if you're on your own. I think the potential of an intimate partnership in one where there's a spiritual orientation is much more awareness because the mirror is so clear, right? With you, it's like I can't, you know me so well, so I can't get away with silly stuff. So it's just like none of that is behavior that will be allowed by you because you won't be controlled because you're in that new consciousness where our free will is not, we're not willing to tolerate that. We have much more sovereignty. Thank you. So that's what I would say has changed a lot and has become clear. And there's a lot of respect for the other as a result. So hopefully that answers that person's question. And then the last thing really quickly is, will it be extremely difficult for relationships, and this person means intimate partnership, to thrive if one of the partners makes a conscious decision not to work on releasing inherent distortion?
My feeling is actually as simple as saying yes, that is challenging.
Yeah.
It's like what that would be. So if there's people in an intimate partnership, and one person is really into the frequency work and is like, this is awesome, I'm really getting this, and I'm grooving on this, I'm really making some serious strides here. The other person is like, I think that's a bunch of nonsense, and I have no desire to make any changes. It's going to be challenging. What it will be is a really good exercise in neutrality for the person who is who's looking to make those changes. I mean, that's going to be a great test of that. How neutral can I be? How much can I step back and let my partner make their own choices, his or her own choices, and not try to control that. And I would say that the best that can be done in that scenario is just to keep on trying to lead by example, by just keeping that focus on inward and saying, okay, I'm gonna focus on raising my own resonance by doing all this frequency work, and let that other person make their own decisions. Yeah. My feeling is that at some point, what's likely to happen is that divide will grow, most likely, and it's in my mind, it's very possible that a relationship won't last infinitely under that under circumstances.
Exactly, and then we have to examine our own attachment to the relationship.
Yeah,
like why are we in it?
Yeah, exactly. What are we getting out of that? Is it because we need certainty?
Yeah, exactly.
Is it what is it really about that?
Yeah.
Is it because we're afraid to be on our own? There's a whole host of reasons that you can stay in a situation that isn't actually nourishing. And
for anyone.
Yeah, for anyone.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes, if you look at it from both people, it's not really. Neither person is quite happy with that scenario. Yeah. Because the person who doesn't want to focus on growth and stuff is like wondering why is my partner doing all this crazy stuff all the time?
Or criticizing me or wanting me to change or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, that takes us to the end of this batch of questions. There are actually quite a few more for you.
Okay.
So we might be bringing you back part 2 sometime.
Okay.
And so thank you so much for answering all those questions.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah.
Karen, could you help me? I hear so often when I look at your video or your website, GFC. Exactly what is that?
A GFC is a group frequency calibration, which looks a lot like a guided meditation on a particular topic. And what I'm doing is I'm helping you to remove the distortion patterns of that particular topic. And because you're coming together as a mastermind in a group to connect to pure source even more and to clear the distortion patterns of this particular topic, what happens is a tremendous amount of momentum starts to happen because of the energetic of the entire group, and each individual is able to move faster and ascend higher than they could have on their own. Welcome everyone. This is the group frequency calibration for a different perspective on awakening. So just scanning you all. All right. First, becoming aware of your body. And as you become aware of your body, please become aware of the outer edges of both your feet. Whatever that means to you. Just notice the outer edges of your feet. Good. And now, please become aware of your weight as it settles into whatever is supporting you. Noticing if you are holding a lot of tension, as opposed to settling in to whatever is supporting you. Just noticing. Good. And now, please notice your breath. Without changing it at first, just noticing your breath. Yeah. And then, after a couple of breaths, and noticing how it is in this moment, deepening your breath, allowing it to fill not only your front body, meaning, say, your chest and your tummy, but also your back body, so your upper and possibly your lower back. Just noticing how much space your breath can take up in your body. Good. Yep. And now please noticing your surroundings. Noticing the sound around you. All the little noises that you take for granted and don't usually notice. And as you become aware of those sounds, noticing the direction from which those sounds come. Good. And now, either with eyes closed or eyes open, depending on what works best for you, noticing the quality of the light, even if you're sitting in semi-blackness. Noticing the quality of the light. Good. Yeah. And now, please triangulate. So for those of you who are new, triangulating means becoming aware of 3 inanimate objects in the space around you. What those inanimate objects are is not important. You're going to notice the distance between each object and you. So for example, if object A is the chair, noticing that the distance between the chair and you is about 6.5 feet, and then feeling the distance between the chair and you. And you'll do the same thing with objects B and C, and you'll notice that as you do this, your sense of where you are in space will clarify. You're going to become more aware of your spatial coordinate. And now, for those of you who are a little faster and more experienced with triangulating, bringing your attention to your upper solar plexus. So your solar plexus is between your belly button and the base of your sternum, which is that big, thick bone in the center of your chest. The upper part of your solar plexus is between the center point of your solar plexus and the base of your sternum. Keeping your attention here, we're going to take a nice deep breath together, holding your breath for a count of 5. And then whenever you are ready, releasing your breath, holding it out for another count of 5. Noticing the length of count that you chose. Noticing if it was easier to hold your breath in or to hold it out. Noticing if you rushed through that breath or really took your time. Good. And as we wait for the mastermind to coalesce, please note that I am working on you at the group and the subgroup level, and that I often work in silence, especially when I'm working at very high frequency levels. I do, however, occasionally make noise. It's typically when I'm removing a distortion pattern that is lower in vibrational order or sticky. And in those cases, I will either hum or yawn or exhale sharply. So, the other thing that you should note is that if I say something that really resonates with you, it's likely yours. And if I say something that you really resist, that you don't think could possibly be you, it's likely yours. So I invite you to remain open and to examine further. Good. So now that the mastermind has coalesced, we're going to ask ourselves that question. How can I become even more aware of my connection only to pure source? And that question again is, how can I become even more aware of my connection only to pure source? And as you ask yourself that question, please imagine, sense, feel, or become aware of the space at the center of your body. And as you become aware of this space, you may notice that it is more vast than what you originally thought. And as you become even more aware of this space, becoming aware of or imagining a brilliance at its very center, that you either see or feel. Yeah. And as you keep your attention on this brilliance, it intensifies and very naturally expands outwards through all of your cells, out through your organs, out through your bones, your flesh, and your muscles. Radiating out through the pores of your skin into the space between your physical body and your spirit body, which is a sphere at arm's length all around you. Please become very aware of the brilliance within the sphere. Good. And now please become aware of the space all around the sphere. And as you become aware of this infinite space, I'm working on you at spirit level to increase your frequency resonance, irrespective of where it began. The higher your frequency resonance, the more effective this session because it comes from the highest resonating order, and the faster your integration or detox. Yeah. This is one of the most important things we do. Good. Bringing your attention, please, to your heart space in the center of your chest, in your nipple line. So we're going to be working on across multiple subgroups. So for some of you, this is the fear of failing, the fear of not getting it right, fear of running out of time, or missing out. Okay, those are the main subgroups here. So working to release these distortion patterns. Including the fear that you won't succeed, okay, that you'll fail, and that there will be no one to tell you what your progress has been. Good. Bringing your attention to the xiphoid process right at the base of the sternum. So your sternum again is that big thick bone in the center of your chest. If you trace your sternum to the base, it goes from bone to flesh. That fleshy point is sensitive if you press on it. That is your xiphoid process. So keeping your attention on this spot. Yeah. This is the distortion pattern of feeling less than. For whatever reason, because your experience is not the same as others, because you can't tell, whatever it is. Good. Yep. Bring your attention, please, to the front of your throat. This is the challenge of the mind. Okay, so for many of you, your minds will want to know. They want certainty. They want to know how you're doing. So this is an ego mind thing. In addition, there's another large subgroup of you where it is difficult for you to let go of the control of the mind, right? To not think, to have something beyond the mind inform your knowingness. So releasing this. Good. Yep. Bringing your attention, please, to your xiphoid process again, about 3 inches or 7 centimeters directly beneath it. We're going to clear out and reset the pain body. Basically, releasing the memory of you with the distortion patterns out of it. So when it's clear, it can integrate with the newer, higher resonating version of yourself to speed and smooth out integration for you. Good. This brings us to the end of this session. I look forward to working with you on the next GFC. These GFCs help people release distortion patterns. It's my sincere hope that you benefit profoundly from this series, which is why I spend so much of my personal resources creating these as my gift to the world. If a GFC topic resonates with you, often more work that can be provided in this one GFC is needed to really clear or loosen deeply held distortion patterns in areas that are sticky. Because these patterns are like layers of an onion, usually there are multiple layers to individual topics. Depending on how much of a challenge this topic is for you, it may make sense for you to go deeper than what this session allows. If you feel this is the case for you, please visit sphericalluminosity.com for more targeted support.